If you were forced to vote for president today, who would you vote for? The Democrats have proven one thing for certain, and that's that just about anybody can run for president. In a minute, I'm going to break down the 2020 Democrat field with particular emphasis on two candidates, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And in the process, I'm going to show you factually why you should support President Trump's re-election efforts. You're listening to Climate and Chaos with Jay Bashayo, and I'll be right back. Hello and welcome to Climate and Chaos, where we see the political climate in D.C. and assess the chaos that ensues. This podcast is a free American media production. Make sure you give them a follow. They're on Parler at Real Free American. Now, I just want to start out by saying that President Trump had probably his best week ever this week, while Democrats had probably their worst. The jobs report for June came out, and 228,000 jobs were added to the economy. President Trump hosted his salute to America in Washington, D.C., where the Democrats painted themselves as unpatriotic as possible. And the Nike situation in Arizona heated up when Governor Ducey decided to pull back any subsidies given to Nike in response to their actions with the Betsy Ross edition shoe they were going to produce. Nike had intended on releasing a shoe with the original United States flag with the 13 colony stars on it until known activist Colin Kaepernick decided that he didn't approve. Nike therefore gave in to Colin Kaepernick's demands, again making the Democrats look as unpatriotic as possible. Now, Joe Biden has slid in the polls in response to the debates, and Kamala Harris has been the big gainer. The Real Clear Politics average as of right now has Joe Biden at about 27%, with Bernie Sanders at 14.8% and Kamala Harris at 14.7%. Looking at the individual polls, though, the Quinnipiac has Joe Biden at 22%, with Kamala Harris in second at 20%, and Bernie Sanders trailing at 13%. So, to understand exactly why President Trump would be the favored candidate over any Democrat that were to actually get the nomination, you have to understand what it is that the Democrats mostly or all have in common. And that starts right out with their policy on open borders. Now, you can call it what you want, and the Democrats will say it's not open borders, but when you don't have a defined plan to stop the influx of immigration in this country, then it's open borders. For example, Joe Biden's website talks about looking at the root causes of migration, but he says nothing about how to stop the influx that our CBP officials deal with on a daily basis. Bernie Sanders' website is even worse. His talks about extending protections for illegal aliens already in the United States, and again, talks nothing about curbing the inflow. And if you ask Elizabeth Warren, I guess it's just not an important topic to her because she has absolutely nothing on her website about it. She's made statements on CNN very familiar to Joe Biden's root cause statements, but doesn't have an official policy. In addition to that, most Democrats are in favor of packing the Supreme Court with liberal judges. They want to expand the number of justices sitting on the Supreme Court so that they can offset President Trump's most recent additions to the Supreme Court. All of them are pretty much in favor of lowering the voting age to 16. Why, you might ask? Well, because they're pretty sure that the millennial vote generally will fall in favor of the Democrats and add more votes to their totals. And it's fair to say that these issues that they want just go on and on. They're in favor of the Equality Act. They want to allow transgender men to compete on female sports teams. They want to abolish electoral college. They know that their left-wing ideology is too extreme and cannot win in the flyover states. One of the biggest topics of debate is the fact that they're in favor of kicking 180 million Americans off their current health insurance and providing them with a government-run one. and what I like to call the avalanche of free college, free daycare, free Medicare for all. But are any of these policies really free? Of course they're not. We're paying for them, we the taxpayers. It was also interesting to see at the second debate when the question was asked if their health care plans would include illegal immigrants, and every hand on the stage went up. So now we're not just paying for all Americans, we're paying for all Americans, and we're paying for immigrant populations that aren't even supposed to be here. So Kamala Harris managed to push her numbers up quite a bit. And she did that by doing two seemingly bold things. She backed the elimination of private health care, and she supported federal mandated busing. But as dishonest as Kamala Harris really is, the next morning she revised her position on health care to allow private supplemental insurance. Now wait a minute, let's think about that for a second. She wants to allow private supplemental additions to a government-run, single-payer healthcare system. Her system, though, includes comprehensive coverage of medical, dental, optical, and prescriptions. So, if the government system is going to cover all of that, what exactly is the role for private health care anymore? Right, there isn't one. So, this is just typical Democrat dishonesty and double talk. And again, it results in the removal of 180 million Americans from their current private insurance. It seemed as though Joe Biden's strategy going in was to attack President Trump like he had already won the primary election and was on to the general election. Kamala Harris had a very different idea in mind. She decided that she was going to attack Joe Biden. And she did that by going after his record on civil rights and additionally his comments that he had recently made concerning the good old days in the Senate. Now, he was referring to the 70s when he worked with known segregationist senators. So she took offense to that. And she also attacked him for opposing federally mandated busing and offered a personal story of how she was integrated into Berkeley when she was 6 years old. Now, this is true. She was integrated. But this was far from the Ruby Bridges moment that she painted this to be. In 1970 is when she attended Thousand Oaks Elementary School in Berkeley, California. However, in 1969, the school was already 40% African American. And by the time she was 12, she had already moved to Canada. She left that part out to finish her middle school and high school years there. Either way, she obviously didn't like how she polled, because again, days later, when she was asked by a reporter about busing, she changed up her story to, well, busing is a tool in a toolbox that can be used, and it's something that we ought to look at. Folks, this is a fact. Kamala Harris might be the most fundamentally dishonest candidate that we have running for president. She didn't gain the 10 points. Joe Biden gave Kamala the 10 points by not challenging her on her record or anything else for that matter. Her record is filled with inconsistencies. For example, Kamala Harris pushed for programs that help find people jobs instead of putting them in prison. But she also argued that when California was ordered to make second offense, nonviolent drug offenders eligible for parole due to prison overpopulation, once again caused by the crime bill, she argued it would reduce the prison's ability to produce cheap laborers. Really, Kamala? Cheap laborers? She also refused to seek the death penalty for a gang member that murdered Isaac Espinoza, a police officer in San Francisco. But she has argued in court several times in favor of the death penalty in California. But, of course, now that she's running for president, she wants to put a moratorium on the death penalty. She has changed position on this several times. In addition to this, she has implemented several policies to address police officers' racial biases, but was notorious for not responding to calls for investigations of certain police shootings. One thing that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have in common is that their times overlap when it comes to the 1995 crime bill. Joe Biden was the author of the 1995 crime bill, and Kamala Harris's prosecutorial days extended from 1990 to 1998. The crime bill was responsible for mass incarcerations, long, lengthy, if not life sentences for drug charges, and also the three-strike rule. Even Bill Clinton, the president that signed the crime bill into law, stated very recently that he regretted it. Now, one thing that Kamala Harris, or Joe Biden for that matter, are going to have to contend with when they run against President Trump is the fact that President Trump has taken several steps to basically upend the crime bill. He's put together the First Step Act and had it authorized through Congress. The First Step Act is an overhaul of basically that 1995 crime bill. It's a lot more compassionate. It fixes the problems with the bill as well. It increases good conduct time from 47 days per year to 54. It locates inmates a lot closer to their homes and families, and improves female hygiene standards, and also calls for no restraints to be used on pregnant women. He has given pardons and commutations to over-sentenced people as well. The most notable case is Alice Marie Johnson. She's a 63-year-old grandmother who was sentenced in 1996, right after the passing of the crime bill, for life for a drug offense. She is now free and able to live out her life thanks to President Trump's First Step Act. President Trump has also announced that the Second Step Act is coming. Among other things, it's going to authorize a requested $88 million to fund re-entry to society programs for people previously incarcerated and those who hold criminal records. President Trump knows that it's hard for ex-cons to find work. He's trying to make it easier. He also knows that the chances of re-offend are a lot higher for somebody that cannot find a way to feed their family. This makes President Trump all the more stronger when competing against these Democrats. They have to account for the past, while President Trump is showing what he's doing for the future. Now, at the beginning of this, I told you that I was going to give you reasons, factual reasons, why it is necessary to support President Trump's re-election efforts. Now, I think a lot of things out there are just very common sense and in plain view, but the Democrats are going to have to run against a great economy. How are they going to run against 3.2% GDP, the lowest unemployment in history? These things are going to make it pretty much impossible for them to beat him. If they try to contend, what are they going to say? Are they going to say that they're going to make the economy weaker? I don't think that's going to play very well. As I stated earlier, these liberal policies are maybe popular in places like California, New York, Chicago, or New Jersey, but they're not going to work in the flyover states. Right after the second Democrat debate, a poll was taken by Fox News. They demonstrated that 59% of Americans polled do not want free health care given to illegal immigrants. If it weren't for liberal bias in polling, I would assume that that number would be closer to 100%. I, for one, know that I'm not in favor of it. I'm not exactly sure why Democrats feel that everyone that makes choices in the world that do well and succeed and be prosperous is responsible for the people that aren't. How is it possible that we can even enact one of their policies? Think about it. The Green New Deal, free college, free health care. The Green New Deal would cost every household in America $52,000 to $72,000 annually. I don't have another $52,000 to $72,000 sitting around, and I think the average person doesn't either. How about free health care? We can just add that to the economy for the small price of about $34 trillion. I don't think that's going to go over very well, especially for the approaching generation of millennials. Has anyone given any consideration to the cost that would fall on them? This might not be a bad time for somebody to propose a balanced budget amendment. Keeping that in mind and getting back to my point, President Trump is going to be extremely hard for any Democrat to beat. And if you like the economy the way it is, if you like rising GDP and lowered unemployment and a good stock market and everything that's entailed with that, you need to get out and support President Trump in his re-election efforts. We have to keep in mind, too, that it's important to retake the House of Representatives this time around. Imagine if President Trump didn't have to deal with the Russia story or the talks of impeachment, the people working against him, conspiring against him. Imagine what he could do if none of that was going on. He did everything that he was capable of doing in these past 3 years with no help from any Democrats whatsoever, and dealing with a plot to overthrow his presidency from the day he rode down that escalator. In my opinion, a second term would certainly ensure more prosperity without question, especially if we can have both houses of Congress back under Republican control. And when I say Republican control, I mean Republicans that are willing to work for the people. Now I want to thank you for tuning in to Climate and Chaos with Jay Bashayo and let you know that there are more great podcasts to come. This has basically just been an introductory type episode for me to give you an example of what this station is going to be all about. If you haven't already, please remember to check out Free American Media. You can check them out on their website, freeamericanmedia.com. You can follow them at Parler at Real Free American. Also, please don't forget to follow me. I'm at Proud OIF Vet on both Parler and Twitter. Or if you'd like, you can reach me through email at info.climateandchaospodcast@gmail.com. Once again, I really appreciate you checking out my channel, and there's a lot more to come. So take care for now, and please come back.